I'm glad you're all here. I'm really, really grateful. I know you have 1,000 other places that you could be and a lot of things calling for your time, and I hope that I'll make it worth your time. I am going to talk. Somebody asked how long it is, about 30 minutes, and then I'll stick around if there are any questions after that. I will be more than happy to stick around and do that. So what is conscious business and why is it important? This is what I hope you'll get from today, from being in here today. I hope that you will get an understanding of what conscious business is. I know it's a word and that's thrown around a lot, and a lot of people don't know what it means or how it applies to them specifically. I hope by the end of this you will know why it's important to you. Each of you individually, whether you know it or not, it's something you need to be aware of and something you're going to be hearing more and more about. What you can do about it starting today in your own life, and some ways we might be able to work together if you have any interest in that. I'll talk about that at the end. So what is conscious business? I mean, obviously you're not the only people that don't know. If you don't know, this baby's kind of freaked out about it. This is a quote from Bucky Fuller. He said, "We must move from a you or me mentality into a you and me one." That applies not just in business, it applies in everything, in every aspect of your life. We have got to know and understand that every thought we have, every word we speak, and every action we take affects everyone around us, everyone in our lives, whether it's our friends and family or whether it's our businesses. Milton Friedman, he was a Nobel Prize-winning economist. And in the 50s or 60s, he was the first one to really, he worked at the University of Chicago. He was the first one to propose shareholder primacy. And that is the concept that the investors are the number one most important thing, and your business has got to be run to pay them back. We live that way now, and corporations think that way, and our stock market is run that way, so it's kind of hard to remember when it wasn't, but it used to be that business was to provide goods and services to people that were necessary. It took several, he says, corporations have no higher purpose than maximizing profits for their shareholders. That was when the concept of quarterly returns, quarter after quarter, increasing earnings was the most important thing. It took us several decades to actually integrate that into our corporations and our businesses where we actually believed it in our society. And currently that is what our stock market is based on. In the 70s, in kind of an answer to this drive towards shareholder primacy, which was making money is the most important thing, a group started called the Social Venture Network. Some of the early members of the Social Venture Network, and now it's called the Social Venture Circle because they merged with an investment group. So if you were going to Google it, you would Google Social Venture Circle. But Aveda, which is a personal product company, and I'm pointing these out just to make a point that it was a wide variety of industries that got involved, a wide variety of people that were saying, wait a minute, is that right that money's the most important thing? Ben Cohen from Ben & Jerry's, Gary Erickson from Cliff Bar. I think probably all of you have heard of that. It's like a meal replacement, kind of a nutritional thing. Eileen Fisher is a clothing company. That's actually a B Corporation that I'll talk about more a little bit in a minute. Birkenstock, which is shoes. Paul Hawken, he was one of the founders of Smith & Hawken, which is outdoor furniture and other things, pretty high-end, made mostly of wood. And he's also currently mostly known for a concept called Drawdown, which is an organization committed to bringing carbon out of the air, which is a different way of thinking about not putting more in, is what you usually hear about. And you can go to drawdown.org, and no matter what your take is on climate change, whether you believe in it or not, it's an interesting concept, and it is global, and it's got an awful lot of really interesting people involved in it. And then the Body Shop, again, a personal product thing. And I want you to notice, too, that all of these companies are still in business. The Social Venture Circle Network started in the 70s, and they all made it. They all did business well and made money. This is Kip Tindall. He is one of the founders of the Container Store, along with a really good friend of mine, Garrett Boone. They started the Container Store. And this is John Mackey. He is the founder of Whole Foods. And together in 2007, they created the Conscious Capitalism Alliance, and they also trademarked the name Conscious Capitalism. There's a lot of confusion out there for people who aren't really, really integrated into this world about Conscious Capitalism is an organization that exists, and it is one aspect and one huge proponent of conscious business tenets, but there are others. It's not the only one. And there's a Conscious Capitalism chapter in Dallas that you might consider being a part of. Not long after that, they wrote this book, John Mackey and Raj Sisodia, and Raj Sisodia is currently the president and CEO of Conscious Capitalism Global, and it is an international organization. And when this book came out, it changed my life. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, but I've always been an avid reader and interested in growing. I have an insatiable thirst for knowledge, so I'm always trying to learn new things. And the way it changed my life, even though I was not involved in business at the time, it made me aware of that I needed to be more aware of where I spent my money. That as a consumer, there's a hashtag vote with your dollars, and it's a concept that anything that you spend money on, you're saying to the world, I want more of that. And it's a simple little mind hack that can completely change your life. When you think about how easy it is to pull into a McDonald's and how it might be a little bit harder to find a parking place at a local restaurant, but do you want to tell the world that you want more McDonald's, or do you want to take that extra 5 minutes and support your little local restaurant and restaurateur and business person? And that's in every aspect of your life, not just in food. So there was a social venture network, Conscious Capitalism. They subscribe to what's called a quadruple bottom line. When they first started having these conversations, there was a belief that you have to be cutthroat or you're going to fail. That if money is in fact the thing that we're all going for, then you have to make decisions based just on money. What they propose is that you have to have a business with purpose. And purpose means wanting to make the world a better place, wanting to leave a footprint of positivity behind you instead of negativity. So your business has to have purpose. You have to take care of your people. And that's not just the people that work for you, it's the people that work with you. It's your merchants and your vendors and your clients and your customers. You have to treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve. It's also a commitment to the planet. It's acknowledging that we can't just keep raping and pillaging and taking our natural resources without care about the future generations and what the world is going to be like for them. And the profit comes. It's so cool that social venture networks started 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And they actually have research, and we actually have the numbers that show that when you do business consciously, you outperform the S&P 500 over time. And it's the concept that, yeah, you might have a bad quarter, you might have a bad half, you might have a bad year because of weather or because of transportation or because of things out of your control. But if you treat your people that work for you, your merchants, your vendors, the loyalty that you gain from them for doing business right pays off over time. The 4 pillars of conscious capitalism are higher purpose, that you're doing it to make the world a better place, that you have that stakeholder orientation. It's funny, when you talk about shareholder orientation or stakeholder, people get them all mixed up in their minds because they have the same number of letters and they all start with an S. I mean, they both start with an S. But the stakeholder model is when you commit not just to the investors, not just to the shareholders, but to every person who has a stake in your business. And again, it's your employees, it's your vendors, it's your merchants, it's your clients. You make sure that the decisions that you make in those meetings that you have about how you're going to do business take all of those people into account. It's conscious leadership. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. The people in the institution are the most important part. It all starts top down. We all know that. It's the people at the top that create the culture. And if the people at the top haven't done the work to be heart-centered and wanting to make the world a better place, then there's no way the culture will. And the conscious culture comes from conscious leadership. Here's some companies that you probably recognize that subscribe to the 4 pillars of conscious capitalism. And this is David Brooks. He's a New York Times columnist. You may or may not agree with his opinions, but I love this. A small group of people find a better way to live and the rest of us follow them. And guys, that's what's happening. These few people that got together to do the social venture network in the 70s to kind of question that shareholder primacy model, it's big now. This is no longer just tree huggers and people, hippies hanging out in California. It is a movement. It is happening. And you're either going to ride that wave or you're going to drown from it because it's coming and it's everywhere. So why is conscious capitalism important to you? I don't know if any of y'all watched the Super Bowl. I spent some time in Kansas City. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, although I am a native Texan. Gotta say that. But the Super Bowl, 49ers versus Chiefs. Chiefs won. That was a great game. And during the Super Bowl, not one, not two, but 3 car companies chose to spend that $5 million for 30 seconds to announce their new electric cars. That is 100% consumer demand. There is no reason to completely restructure your entire corporation and the way you do things in your manufacturing. Because, I mean, we have a glut of oil right now. So this was completely consumer demand during the most watched show in the world. And in addition to them, there was a commercial for Michelob Ultra. I know one of these things is not like the other. But they also spent that $5 million for 30 seconds of time to talk not just about their organic beer, which is super cool, but they actually said in that commercial, for every 6-pack sold, they are going to put 6 acres of degenerated land. They're going to regenerate it and put it back into organic production of food. I could talk about our food system and land regeneration. That's a whole other talk that I could do, but it's really important. If you haven't done any research about it or are not aware of it, we have killed our soil, not just in the United States, but all over the world, and we've got to do better by that. So that was cool during the Super Bowl. This is a thing introducing the Dry Indigo Traveler, 99% less water. I was just walking by Banana Republic in West Village the other day. This was in the window. It was full size. I don't know how many of you have done any work about educating yourselves about sustainable clothing, but the clothing industry is poisoning, putting dyes in lakes and rivers, and doing a lot of bad things to the land. Growing cotton takes an incredible amount of water, and they thought it was important enough. Again, consumer demand. People are starting to say, I want to spend my money in places that are doing things right and that are paying attention. And they thought it was worth their time to create a whole campaign around showing us that this particular brand of jeans uses 99% less water. This is a company that makes clothing sustainably. It's called The Reformation. It's a national company. They've opened one in Dallas. These are ways that you can subscribe to sustainable clothing if that becomes important to you. This is Sophie Eckridge. I met her at the Austin City Limits a couple years ago. She's a social entrepreneur. That's a term that you use if you get involved in conscious capitalism at all. Conscious capitalism applies to everybody that's doing business, including corporations. And social entrepreneurship is that little bit of a smaller, Tom's Shoes was one of the first ones where the buy one, get one program. Sophie makes these shoes and boots online. You can design your own shoes and boots, which is super cool. And all of those textiles are made by indigenous people. They are woven by Mayan tribes, and it's really cool. I had the opportunity to go to their factory last April and see what they're doing there with all of the local artisans. You can choose your own soles and your own leather and your own, and the name of it is Teysha, T-E-Y-S-H-A. And this particular company supports over 75 artisans in 5 different countries. So again, it's just a way you can think, if you're gonna spend $200 on a pair of shoes, you can buy it from them and know that you're actually feeding people's families and paying education for their kids and actually making the world a better place. They are a B Corporation, which is a designation you can get from a company called B Labs out of Colorado. And you have to show that you are, in fact, a conscious capitalist and that you are treating the planet well and treating your people well. Eileen Fisher, like I mentioned, is also a B Corp, and Athleta Clothing just became a B Corp. You can look it up and find other businesses that you want to do business with. Another reason it's important to y'all, this is just from January in Forbes magazine, why a cardiologist became a food as medicine entrepreneur. Food as medicine and our industrial food complex and what we are doing to ourselves to kill ourselves by what we're putting in our bodies. We're eating things that are not good for us, that cause inflammation and cause chronic disease, and then we're going to doctors and we're taking pills and we're getting surgery for things that we really could fix just by eating better. It's a big deal. And that was just, again, in January in Forbes. New York Times last September. This is an article about how to be a more conscious consumer, which I've already talked about. Most of us financially support companies we might not necessarily support socially, ethically, or philosophically. And that's one thing that you can take away from today, is just to be more conscious about where you're spending money all day long. Everything you do, whether it's travel. Building a values portfolio. This was in the New York Times just this year, just last month. And people are getting really interested in where their investments are going. And every large fund group is starting to have a fund that supports only companies that are deciding to work consciously. There's a thing called impact investing that a lot of foundations and family offices are starting to get into, where they want to make sure that they're investing in companies that are doing business consciously. And in the Wall Street Journal, all of these are things that you've heard about just in February of this year. A new source of climate pressure for companies, the workers. People that work for these companies are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, I think we need to look at what we're doing and try to do a little better. The rise of conscious capitalism, and again in Forbes last year. There's a new wave of businesses breaking into the zeitgeist, a profound breakthrough, aligning and combining the power of capitalism with the global human consciousness movement. And if you haven't heard that term, the global human consciousness movement, it's been around since the 60s. That was the hippies hanging out at the Esalen Institute in California, Timothy Leary and all of them. But it is coming out of the closet, so to speak. It is becoming more mainstream. And people who want to do good and be good are growing in numbers. Wine enthusiasts talking about organic wine. That was just in February of this year. In Vogue Business, talking about what the food industry can teach fashion about sustainability. The Regenerative Organic Certification is an international group that is forming to actually have easily accessible standards, so that when you're buying your food, your milk, your produce, your meat, or whatever, you can see that it comes from a farm that is regenerating land and treating people right, and not using antibiotics, and not using fertilizers, and all those things that we've allowed to get into our food system. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Business Roundtable. And it's an organization that gets together, I think every year, it might be every other year, but it is the top Fortune 500 CEOs get together, and they talk about the state of business, and they talk about different things that they want to commit to doing in business between themselves. This is from August 19th of last year. And they said, this part right here, while each of our individual companies serves its own corporate purpose, we share a fundamental commitment to all of our stakeholders. This was the first time that this many people, it was 182 CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, signed this document. And it's a shift. It's an acknowledgement that what we have created, which is quarterly returns no matter what, no matter who you have to kill or beg, steal, or borrow, that created this atmosphere where we have companies that have to buy companies in order to make those quarterly returns, whether that's in the best interest of the people involved or not. And they get gargantuan, and they finally get to a place they can't make those quarterly returns. They have to start selling them off in order to make those quarterly returns, which isn't necessarily in the best interest of anyone involved in those companies. They've redefined the purpose of a business from a shareholder primacy model that says that increased value to shareholders is the number one goal of business, to a stakeholder model that embraces commitment to all stakeholders, including customers, employees, suppliers, communities, and shareholders. There are a lot of people in the conscious business world out there who are saying, yeah, right, whatever, they're not giving up their salaries. Yeah, this was just August of 2019. For me, it's incredibly hopeful that this conversation is moving mainstream. These are some of the people that signed the document, and I'm pointing this out just again to show all the different industries. This is no longer just about granola and yogurt and, again, just hippies hanging out in the woods. These are 182 Fortune 500 companies. And you can find it online easily if you just look up the Business Roundtable statement. This is Chip Conley, and based on Randy's talk this morning, I'm going to spend just one more minute on him than I had intended to. He made his first fortune building the second largest boutique hotel chain in the United States. And he got out of that. He had a life circumstance that made him shift, and he became a mentor for the guys that started Airbnb. They wanted his hospitality expertise. And one thing that happened to him there was what Randy talked about this morning, was how he learned that some of these older people in the company that had become part of the company because of acquisitions were feeling a little bit out of place because tech was it. Tech was everything, and the kids had the leg up on that. But what they very quickly learned was that this mentorship thing went both ways, that the kids do need to learn from us about social interaction. We do bring a lot to the table from our experience of just living in the world and building relationships. He started the Modern Elder Academy, and I had the privilege of going there last December. And again, I'm going to mention this just because of what Randy was talking about earlier. His whole thing is about this last stage of our lives. We've been given 3 decades that we didn't used to have. We used to die in our 60s, now we die in our 90s. And we haven't kept up with that. We still retire at 62. And his whole concept is, let's make that last chapter of our lives the best chapter of our lives, instead of accepting that it's just going to be a slow, steady decline. And you go there for a week, and they have a curriculum, and it's incredible, amazing people. It's in Mexico. And he talks a lot about how to shift if your life is changing because of your business. He says, isn't it ironic that pay, perks, and benefits all cost your company at the bottom line, but authentic recognition, especially when it's most unexpected, costs very little and gives the most impressive return on investment. He's talking about that human-to-human interaction and the value of it. He was a conscious capitalist before it was a word. He was just born that way, to treat everybody well and pay a living wage and do the right thing. Mark Benioff, I'm bringing him up because Randy talked about his book not too long ago. He's the founder of Salesforce. And he says, I strongly believe the business of a business is to improve the world. And I'm showing you these people because they're successful financially, and they have heart, and they're doing business right. And they all have things to say about it. This is the founder of Patagonia, which is an incredible, again, conscious company before it was even a thing. When he started his company, he was hiring 20-year-olds. And he noticed there were days when the office was empty, and he found out that it was because when surf's up, they want to surf. So their hours became whatever to whatever unless the surf is good. And he knew that they would put the time in. They'd either come in early or they'd stay late. He knew they'd get the work done. And he got such loyalty from them. And then they started growing up and having babies. And he realized that they were very distracted from their from people having their children at home and not knowing how they were doing. So he started a daycare where they could actually have their kids there at work. And he's done so much more. You can look him up. And he says how you climb a mountain is more important than if you reach the top. And obviously that speaks to every day of your life. Again, back to those thoughts you have and the words you speak and the action you take. That makes such more of a difference than what your bank balance is. Jeff Weiner from LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a conscious company. He says you have to maintain a culture of transformation and stay true to your values. Again, Eileen Fisher, ask yourself what really matters. How many of us do that every day? How many of us are filling our days from waking up until going to bed with things that we just do because we've always done them? And there they all are again. I also added Jason Craven. He is a local conscious capitalist. He owns Southern Botanicals. And Brian Schultz owns Studio Movie Grill. Who knew Studio Movie Grill was a conscious company? Who knew that you could just choose to go to your movies there instead of somewhere else and be making a difference? So all those books at the top, if you put in conscious capitalism or conscious business into a search engine, thousands of things will come up. Those are some books that I've read that I think have value. And that's what I've kind of talked about so far, is the business part of conscious capitalism. And I'm going to shift now into these books at the bottom are more about your heart and your soul and your mind and who you are as a human. Finding Your Own North Star by Martha Beck, Life Visioning, Michael Bernard Beckwith. He's a great spiritual leader. Thich Nhat Hanh is one of our most famous Buddhists alive, and he wrote The Heart of the Buddhist. He wrote so much. There's like 1,000 books that he wrote. The Tao Te Ching, a lot of spiritual leaders claim that as the guiding force, the number one book that they refer to over and over. And of course, the Bible has thousands and thousands and thousands of things to say about just being a good person and living a good life. I went to a conference last summer called Sages and Scientists. It was put on by Alice Walton, and Walmart is starting an incredible healthcare initiative that, again, I could give a whole presentation on because it's amazing. They're calling it Healthcare 2.0. But Deepak said social, and you can also add business to that. Transformation begins with personal transformation. None of us can be our best selves and do the work that we came in the world to do without first doing the inner work. Danielle Laporte is someone that I love and follow. Kindness is a superpower. It is. When you wake up in the morning and commit to just you're going to be kind in every interaction you have with people, it can shift everything in your life. This is Herb Kelleher, who was the CEO of Southwest Airlines, which is a very well-known conscious company. And he said leading an organization is as much about soul as it is about systems. Effective leadership finds its source in understanding. Again, talking about that interpersonal communication between people. Tony Robbins, I just had the privilege of being at his 60th birthday party last Saturday. He's a transformational leader. He's huge in the personal development world. Love is the oxygen of life. Same thing. If you wake up every morning committed to kindness, if you wake up every morning committed to leading with love in everything that you do with your friends, your family, and certainly in your business, whether you're an employee or you're running a business, everything changes. I personally believe, I believe that we all have a quadrant of mind, body, spirit, and heart. And anybody who isn't 90% happy, 90% of the time, is out of balance in one of those things. And not only I, but a lot of people out there can help you identify which one it is and help you get back on track. 2 tools that I'm going to mention that I think everyone can integrate into their lives that can change their lives are mindfulness and meditation. We've complicated the crap out of them by having all these books and all of these YouTube videos and all these leaders, and they all tell you what you gotta wear and what scent you gotta have, and it's just not that tough, what music you gotta be playing. It's really, really simple. It's simply choosing to focus on this moment. It's getting your head out of the past and out of the future and into where your power really is, which is right now. And it's focusing on what's good about it. Everybody's heard, I suspect, about a gratitude practice or a gratitude journal. Just making sure that you're focusing on that which is going right in your life and putting less energy towards that which isn't can shift everything, not just in your mind, but in who you attract and who you're around. And you can affect the people around you just by doing that. This is Mika. Randy talked about her book today, and there she is, as you can see, meditating. She said she's the Know Your Value founder, and she said that practicing mindfulness has helped her recalibrate and regulate her emotions. Data shows that mindfulness actually increases the gray matter in your brain. There's so much data and research out there. If you're a science geek and if you're way more interested in numbers and stats, we fortunately, because of technology and because of the way we're able to watch the brain, we have so much proof that it helps anxiety, it helps depression, it helps people live better lives. Peter Diamandis, who was actually at Tony Robbins' birthday party on Saturday, if you guys haven't looked him up, he has a thing called Abundance Digital, and that he did, like Randy mentioned, start Singularity University. I get his emails twice a week, and it's profoundly interesting things that are happening all over the world. I learned from him that we are 3D printing meat, for goodness sake. And like Randy mentioned earlier, the vertical farming that's happening in large cities where you don't need soil, you don't need sunlight, you just spritz the roots of a plant with exactly the nutrients that it needs, and it's organic and it's healthy and it's better than anything we're growing outside, and we're moving that way. That's going to increase the value of our food system significantly. And he said, somebody asked him, how does mindfulness impact your critical decision making? And he said it's one of the most important things. So lots of people mainstream are getting into these kinds of teachings and practices. Meditation, same thing. Eckhart Tolle is the spiritual teacher. And he says that the aim of meditation is to eventually become your normal state of consciousness. A lot of people don't have a meditation practice or prayer practice. Some people have it, but it's just that 15 minutes in the morning. And what he's saying here is that when you really get into it and you really get to feeling what it does to your life and how it grounds you in those 15 minutes, you can get to where you're checking in all throughout the day and where your life kind of becomes a meditation. And you're looking for that guidance all day long. Brene Brown, I don't know if you've heard of her. She is a shame and vulnerability researcher from the University of Houston. Her TED Talk is one of the most watched, if not the most. It's had 46 million views. And her talk around vulnerability and shame and how that negatively impacts us and keeps us from being everything that we can be, and how getting shame out of the closet and also allowing yourself to be vulnerable can be a superpower and can make you stronger. And I'm bringing her up because she was on a podcast with Tim Ferriss just 2 weeks ago that I listened to. And she said 95% of what we call pathology is armor. And here's why I'm mentioning that today, now. If you yourself are struggling with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, somehow not feeling like you're functioning fully in the world, if people in your family are, if people that you work with are, to know that a lot of that, and I'm not saying all, but a lot of that comes from things that happen to people in their lives that they were not in control of and they haven't dealt with properly yet, that are keeping them from functioning fully. And when you can acknowledge that in other people, it can help you find compassion for them. And it can help you not be quite so reactive when someone comes at you, or when someone is negative, or when someone has their armor up. And it can help you see them differently and then interact with them differently. I have a theory that anyone who is suffering believes that they are unlovable, unworthy, or not enough. That also comes from some kind of something in their upbringing, whether it was their parents or their clergy or their teachers or their neighbors or their family. If you think about a little baby, every baby is born here lovable and worthy and enough and perfect. And we just start piling on them by saying you should have, or you shouldn't have, or if you'd only. And I have a workshop called Rediscovering Your Inner Compass, because people stop listening to that internal voice and that intuition that we're all born with. Again, the reason these are important is to know that if somebody in your life is struggling, these can all be resolved. There's something that we can do about all of these things that can help people be their best selves. There are people who claim that these three things lead to an awful lot of our anxiety and depression, an awful lot of our drug and alcohol addiction, and even a lot of our suicide ideation, which is climbing rapidly in every age group. It's a social problem for sure. Lance Creighton says that people are looking for inspiration more than leadership. If you are in a leadership position, know that, one thing I hear all the time is people talking about this generation. You can't motivate them, they don't want to work. I don't see that. I see that they want to work differently. Their quality of life is way more important to them than stuff or a 30-year mortgage or a car payment. If you can inspire them, they want to do good work in the world. If you can let them see sunlight in the day and not put them in a cubicle and help them find something that lights them up, they'll work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. It's not that they don't want to work. It's just that they don't want to do things that don't light them up. Lynn Twist, she's an incredible philanthropist and fundraiser. She's raised hundreds of millions of dollars for nonprofit organizations in her lifetime. She wrote The Soul of Money, which is an incredible book. If anybody struggles with a consistent flow of income, she's really good at helping people look at what those blocks are and overcome them. And she's just saying here that trying to be a better person and trying to live a rich life is probably a better goal than just chase the dollar. And what she also says is that the dollar comes once you figure that out. This is Oprah. She has had an incredible impact on my life. And she started a school in Africa to bring young ladies out of poverty and never would have had access to education at all. A lot of girls drop out when they hit puberty because they don't have sufficient ways of dealing with menstruation and just so many things. So she built a school for girls, and she actually has now had some that have come through, graduated, and then graduated from college. And one of her main mentors was Maya Angelou, who I also love a lot, who has a lot of wisdom to share. And when Oprah said to her, "This school is going to be my legacy," Maya said, "Every person you touch is your legacy." And if you can lay that on your heart and walk away today with just that one thing, knowing that all day, every day, and how you're choosing to live your life and impact people around you, that becomes your legacy. So, are you interested in working together? There are things that I do that try to raise consciousness and help people become better people and live better lives. I do work one-on-one. I do have just a few clients, and they're very select clients, but I do have a couple of spots right now. I also do workshops. The one I love the most is Rediscovering Your Inner Compass. But I do a lot of things. I do speak. I love retreats. And the things that I love to talk about are how to be more conscious with business, obviously. Divorce, that's a big thing. Our system is set up to make people hate each other. And unless you go into that process with a real open mind and an open heart and a commitment to being polite and kind, it can get really ugly unnecessarily. Parenting, my first book is called 18 Master Values, Be the Parent You Wish You'd Had, and it's about conscious parenting. Midlife dating, that's a whole new thing that we've flung upon ourselves as humans. We didn't used to live this long, and we didn't used to get divorced so much, and it's this whole thing that people are trying to navigate quite often without doing the work in the middle to figure out what happened to the last one, and quite often people jump right in to the same thing that they came out of. I love helping people navigate that. And aging, again, back to what Chip Conley talks about at the Modern Elder Academy. There's a lot to think about as we get older, and there's more and more to think about as we live longer. And I love having those conversations. And then just living in general, just day-to-day stuff. I am in a fundraising mode for an online portal called ConsciousDallas.com, which is going to be a place where businesses that are providing goods and services consciously will be able to be on there for free in a directory format and list their events. And people that want to live that way, want to spend their money that way, there are so many people doing business consciously, again, like Chip, just naturally, without even being a part of an organization. They just care about people and they just do business right, from where you buy your tires to your accountant, your attorney, where you get your hair done. There's so much, but there isn't an easy way to find them. Even if they have on their website what they do and why they do it, we all know that Google is not infallible, and it's kind of hard to navigate that. There's a thing called washing, where you claim to be doing business good just because you heard it was good for business, but you're really not. And there's a thing called greenwashing, where you claim to be treating the environment well just because you heard that people will spend money with you if you do, but you're really not. So ConsciousDallas.com will be a place where they've all been vetted, and if you go there and click, you'll know that they're a good person to do business with. I'm also in a fundraising mode to start a conscious learning center within an hour and a half of DFW Airport. And if you want to know more about that, you can just look that up on YouTube, and there's a beautiful 10-minute video that Doug made that tells all about that. That is my email address. That is my phone number. And there are some resources from some of the things that I mentioned today. And that is that.
First, Christine Crockett Smith, thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
And, I think that she really touched on some developments that are widespread. You mentioned conscious capitalism. Carl Crayer did a synopsis of that back a few years ago. And I did Trailblazer by Mark Benioff.
Yep.
And I presented a year ago Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. So we've done a little bit of those. And I want to mention a new resource I have found. It's the schooloflife.com.
Oh my gosh, amazing resource.
Yeah, it's a great resource. The schooloflife.com. Find their document on the 8 rules. Literally the most important book I've ever read, Man's Search for Meaning
Viktor
by
Frankl.
Viktor Frankl. I think that's what I want to say to
Beautiful.
complement what you did. This is
Thank you.
important stuff. Let's give Christine another big round.